I feel I feel a little humbled and almost like not worthy. It's incredibly impressive what each of y'all are doing, and the way that you're harnessing all of your energy and your powers for good. It's such a refreshing thing. There's a lot of I work in tech in San Francisco, and there's a lot of heartburn going on in our space right now. A lot of people kind of having these reckonings that like they're not focusing on the right things, and the things that they're focusing on are things that they are hiding from their children. And it's not the most kind of sustainable or optimistic thing all the time. Obviously, what we do, I think, is a little bit different, but it's barely scratching the surface compared to the hard work that you all are doing. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with AllTrails. We are a platform that's really all about helping people connect to the outdoors. Our focus, our whole ethos is around inclusivity and accessibility, and making everyone around the globe, regardless of your age, your fitness level, your ability level, your gender, your ethnicity, all the different things that kind of keep people from taking their first steps on the trail. We're trying to systematically break those barriers down and really make everyone understand that our public lands are for everyone, for all of us. We all have a right to them. We all deserve access to the outdoors. And the way we try and focus our energy is through information, through our hand-curated trail guides and driving directions right to the trailhead, and the sense of community and user-generated content. But again, what we're doing, doesn't happen in a vacuum without all of the hard work that people like you are doing on the front line. So I really do mean it. It is a privilege to get to do this with you all today, and really excited. My only regret is that we're not doing this in person in Jackson Hole. That would not have sucked. But here's to hopefully doing that next year together, grabbing a beer with all you guys after a nice hike. So anyways, yeah, that's kind of my spiel here. I've got some questions for our panel, and I don't know how we want to do this. If we want to kind of open this up for questions and comments at the end or throughout, I'll kind of defer to Morgan on that one. But I've got my questions here. Hopefully, this is fun and informative. And again, I just wish we could be doing this in person, but I do hold out hope that next year we'll get that opportunity. So my first question here is for Lindsay and Freddy. If you guys could just wave real quick so everyone can see. You guys, right? Yeah, big wave. Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, so like a huge part of what we do, and you guys are doing an amazing job with this, is this notion that we all deserve and have a right to the outdoors. But one thing that I've come to really appreciate personally is that access and interaction with nature looks a lot different for different communities. And there's a lot that I think I kind of realized that I can take for granted getting out there that isn't necessarily true for a lot of other communities out there. And so for you both, how do your communities tend to kind of interact with nature, and what opportunities and challenges have you guys experienced, and do you think is sort of out there that needs to be discussed?
I can go ahead and start. So I consider myself of like three communities. First, like an immigrant who's a lot of families from the Southwest. So I'm pretty familiar with like the Southwest immigrant community. And second, living in San Francisco in the inner city without a car. So my first perspective would be that sometimes immigrants that might live in desert communities don't necessarily know where to go hiking, or have some sort of fear that they might be targeted by hostile ranchers, or maybe they don't have the, you know, just the trauma of leaving your border areas. And in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, for that reason, sometimes a lot of people don't have cars. So not having a car is probably the biggest barrier, and no transit systems that go to these national parks, or for that reason, or for that matter, state parks.
So I live in Montana, and when I think about like what the Montana community's interaction with nature is like, I think of it as like simply like a way of life, and that looks different in different places. I previously was living in a very rural community. There's about 300 folks, no cell phone service, very limited Wi-Fi, and engaging with nature there, it was just part of your livelihood. You hunted to feed your family. People would forage and like make endless delicious things out of huckleberries, and yeah, it was part of life. You had to chop wood to heat your home with a wood stove, and so we didn't think about it so much as recreation there, although I always found it fun. But now I live in Bozeman, and I would say it's almost the opposite. Like it's still a way of life, but it's based purely on recreation and just like getting your kicks in. And I think it makes me realize like I'm sitting in like a place of such privilege to be able to have access to so much amazing public land just, you know, 5 minutes away. And yeah, I guess for me, I think of it as interacting with nature in Montana it's truly just a way of life. And I'm really fortunate to live here, but it definitely has its pitfalls with lack of access. And if you don't have a car, it's a lot harder to get to different places, and access to gear, it's expensive to break into like the backpacking world, for example. So there's definitely challenges.
Yeah, I spent 9 years in the ski industry. I had a startup in the ski space, and that was something that really didn't sit well. At first, I love skiing. I grew up skiing. I'm again fortunate. I grew up in the Bay Area, heading to Tahoe all the time. Had the resources to, you know, spend money on gear or a lift ticket. And the more I got in there, and I realized like, this is not my life's purpose. And I love skiing. I love it. I don't know how many people here do it, but the barriers to entry were so high from a it's funny that you both mentioned transportation. It's a very real thing that, again, like a lot of us can take for granted, but between transportation, between the cost, between the gear and everything else, it really made me kind of rethink my dedication to that. And that's one of the things that I really love. And one of the things that I think drives Megan and I and the rest of the AllTrails team here is assuming you can overcome the transportation issue, which is a very real thing. The fact that you don't need gear, and the fact that it doesn't, you know, whether it's physical health, emotional health, mental health, spiritual connection, all of these things that like, and again, in a COVID world, have all been kind of taken away from us, right? The fact that you can still like get all four of those things simply by like stepping foot out in nature, out on a trail, without having to go far, without having to go to the national park, but you do need access to a park, to some open space, to some public land to do it. But, you know, that message of being able to get those holistic health benefits, you know, in a sustainable, renewable resource that's all around us and completely free to access. Like that's a powerful thing. That is a very powerful thing. But again, like one of the challenges is systematically tearing down these barriers to entry, and whether they're physical barriers to entry or psychological barriers to entry. It's real. And it's one of those things that like, I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface on. But as I learn and communicate more with different groups all around the world, it's an important conversation to be having that I think a lot of us take for granted. So to Sachi and Alysa, got some questions for you guys. To say that this year has been challenging or weird is probably like the understatement of all of our lives. This is I'm 42. This is by far the weirdest year I've ever experienced. I'm sure it's the same for a lot of us here. But I also find like there's a little bit of nostalgia already kind of like mixing into this. There are parts that I look back on and already kind of miss. There's some silver linings here. And I think one of the silver linings may be that we've all come to, again, like appreciate the health benefits, both mental and physical and emotional, by spending time outside. And I guess my question for you guys is how has COVID changed the way that you both engage with nature?
Okay, happy to go first. Well, I first wanted to say that I'm really excited to be having this conversation with you and to be meeting you. My background is actually a lot of in engineering and in tech and entrepreneurship. So when we're looking at a lot of the intersection between tech and nature and how do we do that well and what does that look like, AllTrails comes up all the time. And I've been a longtime fan of AllTrails, so I really appreciate this conversation. And so on the other side of my life, I am a very big rock climber and nature photographer, and it's a huge part of my life, a huge part of what brings me joy and something I'm always trying to tie into my work. And because of that, I used to spend so much time traveling. And, you know, every week or 2 weeks, I would be somewhere new. I'd be exploring a new park. Very privileged to be able to be flexible with where I am and what I'm doing. So when COVID happened, suddenly I felt very trapped and very claustrophobic. But it allowed me to explore my community in a lot more depth than I had ever anticipated I would. I went and found all the trails, all the back trails up through the mountains that, you know, they're super steep, they're not well kept, but they're so interesting to get to explore and to weave together into longer hikes and exploring even like the dusty mosquito-ridden local crags that I have and trying to clean those up and make those nicer spaces. The thing that I have noticed with all of this is that, you know, everyone's kind of been forced to go outside. I guess I don't want to say forced, but they've had greater opportunities to go outside, and the trails have become more crowded. The crags have become more crowded. And in some cases that has become an issue, but I really believe in the idea of, you know, people won't want to save or protect something unless they know it and love it. And so while I think there's a lot of things that we do need to put into place to help with the higher traffic flow, I think it's a really great thing that's been happening amongst a lot of tragedy.
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback off of something Sachi said. She was mentioning how she was able to kind of go on those back trails and like kind of take things a little slower and see things that you normally wouldn't. So I'm actually coming to you guys from outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this past winter was my first winter in the Midwest. I'm actually from the East Coast. So to think that, you know, I was looking forward to the spring all winter, and then COVID happened, and all of these things that I was excited to go do outside in the city, I was unable to do it. And it, you know, as Sachi said, kind of forced us outside. At first I was a little scared because I didn't really know, like I hadn't experienced a Minnesota spring, but, you know, being able to, and I'm really fortunate in having a job in Parks and Recreation where a lot of my job is being able to go out to the parks. I actually got to watch Minnesota come alive again after the winter because of all the time I was able to spend outside. And I actually timed it perfectly with the first weekend in March, I rescued a dog. And so being at the stay-at-home order with our only the thing that we were allowed to do is go to the parks, I was able to watch the spring come alive. And I was also able to like form this beautiful bond with this animal that I had just welcomed into my life. So really now, as you were mentioning, Ron, this like little bit of nostalgia, I find myself too a little nostalgic for this time where my days every single weekend was in a park looking for new signs of life and looking for new traits in my dog. And so I think that as hard as 2020 has been, I think I'm going to remember it as like one of the strongest years of my life in connection to nature, because it was, you know, even though it was forced, I think it is also a little bit of a blessing because it's, you know, I now have these new memories that I probably wouldn't have had time for otherwise.
I love it. I couldn't agree with what you guys said more. We have 3 little kids here, and for anyone in the Zoom who has kids, know, like, you become a chauffeur, right? Like in normal times, you're a chauffeur. We're driving around, to sports and birthday parties and play dates and this and that, and it's all, like, every weekend was always so fast and kind of, I guess, devoid of presence a little bit, because we're always like, okay, rushing to the next thing. And one of the things that I love, and Megan has heard me say this a ton, is how everything had just slowed down so much. Like what you were just saying, Alyssa, like, there is no place to be, there is no place else to go. And so we do these like family hikes, and my youngest is 4. So it's not like we're like getting deep out there or anything, but just having these unstructured, like unbounded, all right, we're just gonna go wander through the hills for a while, and the memories that we're making and everything else. Again, it's like, it's so fun. There's so much crumminess out there, right? Again, like, this is like the understatement of ever. But like, for me, for my family, there's this beauty and grace and like inspiration and hope through all of this as well, that, again, I keep trying to like instill that in my kids. My oldest is 11 and my middle is 8, and just, so they're old enough to kind of get this and like really hammer this home, to appreciate it, to appreciate this slow time together outside. It's such a treat. And I think we all kind of hope that, even when things return to normal, sort of like this slower pace, this connection in nature, I hope that that's one of the sort of like lasting, I don't know, like after effects of all of this. So, that's one of the things, like, there's some optimism here too. So I guess sort of last question here, that I have for Freddy and for Alyssa. As stewards of the land, it's our responsibility to protect outdoor spaces, right? Like, we can't just assume that the places we grew up loving and exploring are going to be there for future generations. And again, as a parent, like, this is something I'm acutely aware of. What does land reciprocity mean to you? And as more people look to venture outside, how can we make sure we're making a positive impact when accessing our public lands?
Alysa, do you want to go? I have a lot to say about it, so.
I'll go for a little bit first. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm in the parks and recreation space, and I kind of want to give some background as to what I'm about to say. So I think that the biggest thing that we can do is just always remember to be flexible and to like go the extra step, and just remember that all of this, if we want the land to be there, like, we do have to kind of do more than sometimes we think we need to. And I think that this is shown by during COVID. I have my role as Parks and Natural Resources Coordinator for a regional park agency, and that involves a lot of things, but rarely does it involve doing park maintenance. But because everybody was out in the park so much over COVID, it needed help, and we didn't have enough staff. And so, like, very gratefully, my entire agency was very willing to kind of switch roles on the fly, and understanding the fact that we're all in this field because we love and care for nature, and we want everyone to have access to it. And so usually in a job that I'm doing in like an office setting, throughout the spring and the summer, I was mowing golf courses or watching the regional trails and trying to clean up after them and make sure things were good. And I think it's just like a reminder that we need to always, like, we need to be giving back for everything that the land gives us. And sometimes that's a little bit more than maybe what we're used to, but just kind of having the mentality of, every little bit helps. And so, like, there's nothing too little that you can do to kind of give back. And that really, it's just like this cycle. Like, I helped keep the regional trail clean, but then now I can go run on the regional trail and someone else is doing it for me. Just kind of understanding like the ebbs and flows, and that, if you do something, eventually someone's going to help you out there too.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a multifaceted phenomenon that needs to happen. So I think our city departments, state parks, National Park Service, they need to realize that more people are using trails and our outdoor amenities. So they need to start funding more for, trail restoration, but also managing the waste. I've been working in solid waste field for 6 years. And so I've seen like directly the impact here in San Francisco, at least, working for the part of the environment on the amount of waste that is being generated, especially now that people are doing more picnics and, camping more. So more education needs to be done, just simply telling people to, hey, we have, bring your own water bottle, or try to pack in, pack out. So just more education around that. And that includes everyone from our cities to those that are working in the parks directly. They can do simple shout outs on social media, reminding people about being better stewards. And lastly, I think, we can start developing more volunteer programs. I have worked with a lot of youth doing beach cleanups, cleaning up parks, and that's a great experience for young people to get their hands dirty per se, but also they see the impact of the work that they're doing. So yeah, thanks.
That's awesome. Yeah, again, as if I am like really thinking big here about what the opportunity is, again, through this ethos and this lens of like the outdoors are for everybody. Like, I know there's a lot of conversations to be had about preservation versus conservation, sort of the nuance between them. But if we acknowledge that everyone has a right to the outdoors, it does increase capacity. That is a fact, right? Like the impact is real. The flip side of that, the hope, the optimism that I carry, at least, is that there are a lot of people where nature is this like abstract, scary, dirty thing, right? It's like, it's mud, it's mosquitoes, it's bears, they're gonna get lost. And obviously, like, everyone in this Zoom knows that that's not just the case. All of the, again, like just the holistic, like the world is a better place. People are better when we're spending time outside, right? And by turning it from this like abstract, scary, dirty, gross thing into something that like people appreciate and personalize and internalize, and it turns real for them, and it becomes something that then they are going to be more invested in, again, like preserving and maintaining and protecting. And then it becomes like, if we do this right, like it becomes a voting issue, and it becomes like a frontline issue for how we allocate budgets. Like we've all seen how strained the park services are, right? And I think like that's our hope, that's our goal, is by, again, like getting this like global reawakening to the beauty and the importance of the outdoors. We can all collectively like decide as a species that this is something that we want to preserve and maintain, and again, ensure is there for future generations. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox on that. But I love that, again, like looking at like the future leaders here, that this is something that you guys, it took me a long time to understand that you guys are already ahead of the curve. It's so cool. I guess we're actually did a pretty good job of staying on time here. So what we're gonna do next is, I guess, go into some breakout rooms, 4 different breakout rooms. We've got Freddy and Kim, Sachi and Chris, Alyssa and Magali and Lindsay and Mara. I hope I didn't mispronounce anyone's names. And I don't know who's on point for organizing this breakout, but that's all I got in my cheat sheet notes in front of me here. But thank you guys for an awesome panel, and kind of putting yourselves out there and answering these thought-provoking, tough questions. You guys are great. Again, it is an inspiration being in your presence here, so thank you for that. And thank you, Morgan, for running this program too. It's so cool.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we go on to the remaining of the sessions and enjoy what will be, I think, a really impactful week with an excellent starting. I just challenge us all to continue to push each other in conversation, to not step out our comfort zones in who we speak to, reach out to strangers, reach out to our fellow participants, and summit people. who are here, and imagine what can our best future look like. There's so much narrative and so much legitimate and real conversation of the devastation, frustration, and all of the different issues that have been exposed this year. But we've been, in just the past few hours, and especially like in our past breakout groups, been enjoying conversations discussing what can be better and how can we be a part of that change. And we are the community. We would discuss this in ELP. We are the community that is going to see that. May not be yet the global or national takeover, but we have experienced how important and powerful those small changes within our households, within our communities, within our sphere of influence have been for our own lives. And so how can we bring that to the children that we work with in our jobs, the staff that are under us or beside us in our government agency, the rich research that's going on and the representation we have here? How can we be the changes that are necessary to keep this country functional? Vote and enjoy the remainder of the summit.